Great. I would like to first introduce Émilia Decaudin. Émilia is a transgender rights activist and district leader in Queens. She was elected as the youngest ever member of the New York State Democratic Committee in 2018. She has successfully amended the rules of the New York State Democratic Committee to remove unnecessary references to the gender binary and to accommodate the election of gender non-binary members. In June 2020, Émilia was elected as one of the two first openly transgender Democratic district leaders in New York City, representing the 37th Assembly District, Part A in Queens. Thank you, Émilia, for joining us today. Tiffany Cabán is a queer Latina who represents the 22nd New York City Council District. After working as a public defender for several years, Tiffany decided to run for New York City Council to redefine how the city approached issues such as public health and public safety. Throughout her professional career, she has used the law to help New York City's most vulnerable communities, and her experiences advocating on behalf of her clients helped her identify some of the worst inequities of our criminal justice system, like the criminalization of poverty, mental health issues, and substance use disorders. Thank you, Tiffany, for being with us today. And then lastly, we have Marc Fliedner. Marc is the director of the Protection and Advocacy for Individuals with Mental Illness and Individual Rights at Disability Rights New York. Prior to joining DRNY, for 15 years, Marc served as an assistant district attorney for the Brooklyn DA's office. He spent several years in private practice handling criminal defense and initiating lawsuits on behalf of survivors of sexual assault. In 2017, Marc ran for Manhattan District Attorney and was the first out gay man to run for district attorney in the US. Thank you for joining us today, Marc. And I'm going to start by passing the first question over to Marc and ask that you tell us a little bit about DRNY and what it means to be the Protection Advocacy Agency for New York.
Hello, everybody. So pleased and honored to be in this space with Émilia and Tiffany and everybody here. I'm Marc Fliedner. I'm a white male, gray hair. I'm sitting at my desk at the offices of DRNY at 25 Chapel Street, Brooklyn. That's an invitation for you to reach us if you need to, although I'm the only one sitting in the office at this time. I have a blue wall behind me, a bright blue wall, wearing a black jacket and a blue shirt. We obviously are grateful for the opportunity to let everybody know what DRNY does. DRNY is the protection and advocacy system for the state of New York. Each state has one. We're funded primarily by Congress for the purpose of making sure that we provide legal advocacy to individuals with every kind of disability. Our advocacy includes direct client services. It includes systemic litigation, including class action litigation. It includes all parts of monitoring and investigation of congregate care settings as necessary and appropriate. And it includes this, outreach and to all members of the community, and particularly happy to talk about the issue of intersectionality, which is going to be one of the topics today. So thank you.
Yeah, and that leads great into the first question, which I'm going to ask Tiffany. Tiffany, what are your thoughts on identifying intersectionality, and how do you view the intersection of LGBTQ and disability identities?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. You know, I apologized up top, but for folks, I'm sitting in a car. I am wearing a black and gray plaid shirt, hair in my usual ponytail, the intersection of, you know, LGBTQIA+ and disability. I guess I want to like zoom back and out for a second and talk about sort of like movement work generally, right? Liberation struggle generally, because, you know, while we can talk about the intersection of our identities, either holding certain identities or holding multiple identities, you know, really what we see when we broaden out in you know, in a capitalistic structure is the taking of these identities and creating subclasses, right? Creating barriers of access that then create a smaller class at the top that gets to hoard resources, power, et cetera, and using pieces of identity to other folks and do that, right? And so those are the similarities of those identities, but then the intersection of them, because you see them, and I'm going to talk about it in the context of the work that I know most intimately, but criminal legal reform work, and then more broadly abolition work, right? And talking about the ways that we have criminalized and created barriers for folks that hold these different identities, whether it is because you are Black or brown, whether it is because you are neurodivergent, whether it is because you experience mental health difficulties, like whatever it might be. But then when you, at the intersection of those things, when you hold them together, you can find yourself on the margins of the margins, right? And so thinking about, just the way that how, whether you are LGBTQ, whether you are part of the disability, whether you are part of any of these other intersections, how you have been historically pushed into long-term poverty, how you have historically, been faced with barriers to access to employment, how you historically have been criminalized, right? We know in the same way that queer folks are incarcerated at much higher rates than other folks. We also know, for example, folks with a disability or an intersection of some disability are responsible for, or they make up over half of the people that are killed by police every single year, right? And looking at why those things are, and then understanding that these fights are like very connected. They are the same fights, but obviously there is uniqueness to them depending on the multitude of your identities. Right.
That was very robust. Thank you for sharing that. And I know that's the whole point of this. That's the whole point of this is to talk and have conversation, and for people to learn, really, and not to call on you, Marc, to share more, but I know Marc has a lot to say about people with disabilities being killed at disproportionately higher rates by police, because I know he helped write a very robust report on that topic.
Did you want me to elaborate, or that was just a segue?
Yeah,
we worked with John after Daniel Prude was killed in Rochester, which probably we're now unfortunately, initiating conversations about what that looks like a year later from our digesting the information. We gave ourselves 6 months to really wrap our heads around what should be the guiding principles that each community should take into consideration in deciding a model for response by family members or an individual for assistance with acute mental health crisis that doesn't mean a police officer in a uniform with a gun. And so, we're proud of the report. You can access it, through our websites or reach out to me to get it. But that was just the beginning of a conversation. We want to continue that conversation because I think actually in recent months, I'm going to say sadly, there's sort of been a kind of a backwards trajectory, and where folks with mental health issues have been by some, electeds and people running for office sort of, demonized like the good old days. And so we've got to be really vigilant, and voting and staying engaged is part of the reason that we need to do that, the way to do that.
Could I add one thing to that too? Like, it also all ties back to like infrastructure and who we build a landscape for, right? Because and even goes back to your question on the intersection of being LGBTQ or part of the disability community. It's like, well, when you're in an environment, to Marc's point, where like systems are set up where landlords push you out of your homes, where you don't have educational opportunities, where like companies and bosses don't give you opportunities, and then you are more likely to be found out in the street without resources, then all that's left is to be policed and surveilled and controlled, right? It is the system there that is left to catch you.
Right. I'm gonna shift things over to Émilia. Émilia, what are some of the unique challenges that people from the LGBTQ community may face when running for office? I know that, as I mentioned in your bio, you've done a lot of work to help change that, but I'm sure that the challenges are there.
Thank you. For everyone here, my name is Émilia Decaudin. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a white woman. I'm transgender. I have long dark hair, and I'm sitting down with a heather gray fuzzy shirt. I think to kind of connect this a little bit to what we've been discussing previously, you know, members of the LGBTQ community don't just run for office because it's the thing that, you know, people kind of just do in the course of life. Like, people run for office because they see a need in their community that's not being met. And either the people around them are pushing them to do so, or they see how something about themselves can fix a very particular problem in their communities that's not currently being addressed. And a lot of these same barriers that prevent LGBTQ people and queer people from, you know, existing authentically, no matter what they're doing, are in place, you know, at double strength, or honestly like 100 times strength, to prevent them from running for office. And that is, of course, exacerbated, you know, if you're facing, you know, other inequities, you know, if you're Black, if you're, you know, brown, if you're Asian, if you have a disability, if you don't speak English as a first language, all of those things make running for office more difficult. And those difficulties, you know, really come together in terms of an expectation of knowledge, an expectation of having a community around you that you can lean on in your personal life to manage your affairs, you know, so to speak. Like, you know, in the past, when white men would run for office, they could put in all of this work for themselves, knowing that they would come back home to a home-cooked meal and a house taken care of and the kids being raised. And while that is, you know, an example that applies also to, you know, sexism and, you know, other inequities, in particular with the queer community, we face that inequity really head on, because we are so much more likely not to have that kind of stability at home and that kind of network that can support us. And all of this is beyond the kind of discrimination that queer people face when running for office. You know, I am eminently grateful that when I ran in 2020 for district leader, I did not face the kind of discrimination that I was really expecting in my own community in Queens. But a year before, when I helped to amend the rules of the New York State Democratic Committee in order to simply allow non-binary people to run for party office, and, you know, kickstart that norm of, you know, asking ourselves, like, what other barriers there are to people with particular identities from accessing the system, I received an incredible amount of abuse and hate online. And that was very personally difficult to deal with. And it's only because of the community that I have, as well as the privilege that I enjoy, that I was able to make it out of that situation, you know, frankly, alive.
And for those of you who may not know, a little background on the rule that Émilia jump-started the change to is, prior, it had to be one male elected official and one female elected official. There was no space for non-binary people or trans people. And if I'm correct, Émilia, the way they changed the language is now it says people of opposite genders or two non-binary people. Right. Is that right?
So the way it was before was it said one male and one female, and multiple political parties had rules such as, or have rules like that. This is not a problem focused on any particular party or group. Within my own party, I changed that to say two people of different genders, as a sort of compromise for the, you know, original mission of gender equity that rule was put in place for. while allowing people who don't identify as male or female to run for office. These rules did not prevent trans people from running, only non-binary people, but it did contribute to a bioessentialist atmosphere that certainly, from experience, not myself, but other people, has certainly intimidated trans people. And the confusion around it has also, led to an atmosphere where folks don't want to actually put themselves out there and assert themselves as running for the female position. When, like, for instance, in my case, I am not non-binary, but when I ran for district leader, I got a ton of stuff about how I'm taking away a female seat or whatever. And so the charged, like the gendered aspect of the position previously led to a charged atmosphere that both fully prevented non-binary people from running, but also did dissuade trans people from running. So I'm working to generalize that rule in New York State to require political parties and groups, regardless of affiliation, to amend their rules to allow non-binary people to run. And I'm hopeful that both, increases the confidence of non-binary trans people to run for those same positions, while also serving as a way to kickstart the equity process with regards to this kind of identity in other aspects of public life beyond just the rather internecine political party space.
Certainly. And when I was doing my research for this panel and I read about that work that you did, that was one of the most interesting and exciting things that I read, because it's something that unless you are a part of that community, you wouldn't think anything of that rule being there. And so kind of like what you were saying before, you run for office because you see a problem. That's a problem that many people wouldn't see that you saw and you were able to fix. So thank you for that. Marc, I'm going to ask you, and this is not a shame question, but you are the only one here who did not win your race. And so despite losing the election that you ran for, do you think your runs for office helped move the needle towards more inclusive candidates and policies?
Sure, hope so. And I see evidence of it. I was running in a 6-person race with a party favorite, but sometimes folks run for office just to be able to nudge balls in certain directions, right? It's funny, Helen and I were talking yesterday about this, and we referenced Bernie, who really, he was able to hold control over certain issues and force the party to do the right thing in the context of a very a 6-person race in Brooklyn. We were all rather progressive, but some people were talking the talk, maybe more than ready to walk the walk, by having folks that were really progressive and somebody that was an out gay man for the first time kind of, holds their feet to the fire. And I think that's really important. The cool part was, you mentioned a Manhattan run. When I didn't get the Democratic nomination, folks in Manhattan who were agitated by some of the things that the then Manhattan DA were doing said, what do you think if we let you write us in? And I said, yeah, sure. And I had to move myself to Manhattan just so I'd be legit. But I was so psyched about that, because here's folks who said, our party didn't give us an option, so let's create one. Let's use the system and do some write-in voting. And I was happy to be able to facilitate that. I'm interested to know, if you don't mind, I asked my colleague Tiffany Cabán if my run for DA and her extraordinary and really newsworthy run for Queens DA helped move the ball forward in ways that she can kind of reflect on.
Well, I also think that in ways that maybe you don't even know, Marc, because I'll get to the DA race, but when you ran that write-in campaign in Manhattan, I was a Manhattan public defender in court every day. And I can't tell you what it did for myself, my colleagues, to see somebody running on those things, to make a really, good run at it, and also to see the shifts in practice as it was happening, right? And when I talk about when I ran for DA as a public defender who had never done anything related to electoral politics before, and being convinced by a few friends to do this thing, there were a few places that I pulled from that made me believe it was worthwhile and possible. And Marc, you were one of them, right? Like, you doing what you did, and then, quite honestly, like being where I lived, right? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez winning, and then seeing, I was following Larry Krasner in Philly and Rachel Rollins in Boston and Suffolk County, Mass. And to your point about moving and shifting things, when I decided to run, did not think I had a chance in hell to win, but it still felt worthwhile for exactly the reasons you stated, that I saw these people who were in the field. Some of them were talking the talk, but I knew that, like, my clients, our clients, were consistently the exception to the rule, and it wasn't having the intended impact. And I wanted to call them out on their bullshit. And that was the goal. It turned into something, wildly different. And we made a really, really good run. But again, going back to the idea of like, you locate everything within movement. I absolutely believe that you shifted the needle, that we shifted the needle, that we continue to shape the landscape and keep building, even when you talk about not just like criminal legal like elected spaces, but just generally speaking at every level of government. It's just incredibly, incredibly important.
Thank you for adding to that, Tiffany. I'm going to direct this question first to Émilia, but then invite everyone to answer, because I think it would be interesting to hear from you all. How has your work and career been influenced by your identities? So whether that be your ethnicity, your LGBTQ status, if you're a person with a disability, all those things.
So there's an extent to which my range of identities, which, as you get more involved and learn more things about yourself, it's more complicated. There's an extent to which it did not influence my decisions to run, if only because I have always been organizing in a movement setting. And that started in 2015 with Bernie Sanders. And that was before I came out as trans. And then since then has, continued. I've always been like for instance, when I ran for district leader, I was recruited to run for that. When I was on the state committee, earlier than that, it was primarily because I took the initiative to ask after someone advised me to do so. And in all those instances, my identity has, informed the decisions I've made, and the work that I prioritize, and how I comport myself, and how I understood how people in turn viewed me. I don't think it's what has driven me to do this outside of my values in general, as a socialist, as someone who believes in inequality, and does my best, and I fail sometimes, but I do my best to fight for it, for folks with identities that I don't share. And it's really those values that have driven me to do that. Although, as I think a lot of people on this call, are likely aware, when you have a marginalized identity, that is often enough a gateway into this kind of politics, because you learn, or you face the brunt really of discrimination in a society like ours that is not built for us. As someone who also has ADHD and may be on the autism spectrum, this world has not been built for me in a while, even before I came out. And there are, certain inequities that I've faced, and others that I have not faced. And those have definitely impacted my perception of justice and my attunement to it, but less so on it from an identity perspective, mostly from a values perspective.
That actually shifts nicely into another question that I had that I'll ask either Marc or Tiffany, whoever unmutes first and feels compelled to answer, is how do you balance LGBTQ activism in your work along with supporting other minority communities? And do you find that being a part of the LGBTQ community enhances your advocacy work with other typically marginalized communities?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at this. And it actually ties into some of what Émilia was talking about, right? You know, I constantly think of Barbara Smith and the Combahee River Collective when, you know, they coined the term identity politics, which gets misdefined all the time. It like literally means that you bring your whole self into your politics, because, right, you are interacting with these systems that were not made for you and in fact exploit or marginalize you because of these identities. And so you are best situated to not only locate where the problem lies, but ideate the solutions to those things. And so, you know, when you look at how being a part of those communities and then being an ally or in partnership with other communities that are similarly situated, but hold maybe different identities, you know, you realize that you are part of one liberation struggle. And this is something that I've really been more intentionally leaning into and learning, especially in disability justice spaces, is that, you know, and I've been admittedly been learning a lot more over the past couple of years in these spaces. And I credit a lot of incredible people like TL, who is an abolitionist and really great advocate in the disability justice world, but saying, like, if you are part of the movement for Black lives and you are, you know, ableist in your practices, then like you are hindering the whole movement. None of us will be able to be free. The same thing, vice versa, right? If you are carrying racism into or transphobia or all of these into it. And so recognizing that you have to hold space and account for and care for and fight for, you know, everyone, and collectively hold it together, and that how that's actually necessary. It's not an icing on the cake. It's not additive, but it is literally the only path to, then it creates for powerful spaces of really being aware of and consistently sort of like listing out and seeking out all of your different partners in these different spaces, doing different work because of the different identities and experience. And it's a muscle, like, quite honestly, I believe it's like a muscle that you grow and build, and it becomes very much so tied to your survival once you internalize those pieces.
Marc, do you have anything you'd like to add to
that? There were things that both of our colleagues said that spoke to me. I had the unique circumstance in my journey. I'm kind of answering back to Émilia and enhancing. So I started in the Brooklyn DA's office, investigating carefully and prosecuting sex offenses against women and children and men in 1987. Don't do the math. And I was a straight man. I identified as a straight man. And then I left the office and did some other work in actually New Jersey and New York, and then came back 15 years later as an out gay man. And what, at first, the two distinctions were that I had been traumatized by my coming out process. I was very moved and found it really important, Émilia, that you filled this in about the harm that was inflicted upon you because you put yourself out there. So my coming out process in a law enforcement world overall was traumatic. I have a depression and anxiety diagnosis. And I brought all of my knowledge of the mental health world back to the office. And then I saw an office that was not taking into any realistic consideration the needs of people who had been charged with crimes, who have disabilities, and how, you know, all of the trauma that they've endured in their lives played into the events that found them in front of a criminal court, and also the survivors of violent crime and the witnesses. One of the most compelling cases that I prosecuted was a hate crime against a trans woman who suffered a traumatic brain injury. And Helen and Christy, who are my two colleagues on the call, that was my first exposure to TBI. And so I came back to the office, and then I continued to enhance my view of the work from this lens of somebody who understood the value of looking at the whole individual, right? Not just the charged or the victim, if you will. And I hope it still informs the work now. And while it played a role in why I, as an out gay man, ran for office, I think I agree with my colleagues that it was just part of the overall texture of who I was and what I believed in.
Definitely. And I want to go back a little bit to what Tiffany said before about everyone constantly learning, and no one is an expert in every single area in terms of like Black Lives advocacy and disability advocacy, and acknowledging that is the first step in accepting support and creating a network of people who do know how, who are intimately involved with advocating for those communities. And I will say again, in preparation for this, I scrolled through some Twitter and I saw that just today, Tiffany, you were posting about how police officers were blocking curb cuts, and how those police officers they said straight to the camera that if they were asked to move their vehicle, they would say no. And that right there is exactly the sort of support that we need from people like you who listen and pointing out those injustices when they happen. Okay. Next question. I don't see any questions in the chat. I've put in there, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask them. We do have a note that all the panelists are very personal and very good and interesting, which we love to hear. Here we go. I will open it up to anyone, whoever wants to answer first. Is how can voting in local elections bring about concrete, meaningful changes to the LGBTQ community and for people with disabilities?
I mean, hyperlocal is certainly, like, I can think of a million examples, and obviously in large part because I'm currently a sitting council member, and these are exactly the things that I'm thinking about now. I am the co-chair of the LGBTQ caucus, and so like our caucus exists, and it's the most diverse queer caucus we have ever had. I think typically when we talk about representation, it has consistently majority been white, cisgendered, gay men and lesbians, but we have this beautiful caucus that is, reflects a bit more diversity. There's still ways to go, and ways to improve in representation, and again, representation in a meaningful way in the ways that I talked about in terms of, the true meaning of identity politics. But then you look at all of the different functions of the council. The three big buckets are our budget. It's a $98 billion budget, and we decide along with the mayor's office, where the money goes and where it doesn't. And when you think about all of the funding initiatives and whether it's going into providing support for, trans folks, whether it is about curriculum, in our LGBTQ curriculum, in our schools, whether there's this whole host of things. When we talk about legislating at the city level for increased employment protections so that folks can't be discriminated against because of their identities. Like, these are very real material things that your local electeds, can do. And so, and I think there's an even bigger opportunity on the hyperlocal level, because it's a little bit different. When somebody runs maybe for Congress or president or whatever it is, you don't get necessarily face-to-face time with that person, but your district leaders, your council members, you're talking to them on the street, like, every day. And so you really can be highlighting these issues that matter to you and engaging in a meaningful way. And they're the things that we carry, with us into office. And that connection is very, very clear.
Definitely. You're talking to them here. I mean, we're in this small group setting where if you're in Émilia or Tiffany's district, you're seeing them face to face. Émilia, I'm going to ask you a question. I had it written down. Where can people who want to run for local office start their journey? Because I know I've read that district leaders is like a great spot for people who want to break into politics. It's where they begin. And since that is where you're at, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
So without getting partisan in any particular suggestions, I'd say that the best way to start really is to start with your community. No one runs for office alone, and no one should run for office because they want to, and it's just an idea that they had. If it's something that you feel called to or drawn to, talk to people who are already doing the work in where you live, because on one hand, there's a lot of elected officials and they can't coexist. So someone has to get knocked out. But also the people that you're aligned with and that are doing the work are going to be able to put your desire or your calling in context. And that context is what allows us to, as a movement, actually achieve change. Because likewise, for instance, like Tiffany being in the council, like she's not able to, go and just do whatever she wants, in Astoria. Like, you have to work as a body, and that requires, building relationships and having a strategy and doing things with intention and deliberately. And in order to, accomplish things, either at, the party level or, in public office, you need to, develop that strategy, and that the implementation of any such strategy, begins at, asking yourself whether or not like you're the right person to run at all, or whether it's your time or whether your energy can be spent elsewhere. So I would encourage people who feel that calling to, start having those discussions and be prepared to, not do it. And I know that's not particularly encouraging, or like it's not a positive statement per se, but ultimately it is both, I think, personally healthy. It sets expectations and helps you ground your own expectations for like what it is that we're all doing here. But it's also realistic in the sense where, unless you have a particular set of resources, it actually is difficult to just come in and do your own thing and win. And so I don't want to give people advice to just tell them and just do it. Just everyone go run for office, because especially, all of this on this call, if we're either queer or we have disabilities or both, it's not easy. And so, being deliberate about whether or not you take that step and how can save you a lot of heartache too.
Yeah, that's extremely insightful, especially going back to what you said. I think it was in your introduction, just when you first ran, the amount of transphobia that you experienced in your run. So being honest with yourself and knowing the kind of hate, and especially now that we've got keyboard warriors and people who like to hide behind a username and say really mean things, that's an important consideration that I feel like most people wouldn't have thought of. So I will ask Marc this question, and Marc, if you don't know the answer, I'll let you I'll let you pass it off to one of our other panelists. Are there any initiatives in New York City to connect youth with local politics or help educate youth on local politics?
I'm going to say that there are, because New York City is New York City, thank goodness. Probably not enough. I'm going to defer to my colleagues on specifics because they're more in that world right now than I am, because I'm so in the disability advocacy lane. What do you think, folks?
Yeah, there are a ton, and like I don't know how far, like how young youth you're thinking, but even at obviously the teenage years, young adults, you have your youth Democratic clubs or youth Republican clubs, but even on a more basic level, your hyper local electeds, like go knock on their door, come to my office, right? Like we can help set up spaces and roundtables and have different discussions. But the thing that I think that we should really deeply be investing in and spreading a lot more, and do exist in a lot of places, student councils, right? Like it is just such a beautiful, beautiful on-ramp to civic engagement and political empowerment, and having kids that recognize that they can talk to their fellow students, and then they can talk to somebody who is in power, right? Who generally gets to call the shots, but they get to, at a regular meeting, sit down, say, these are my concerns. These are the solutions we propose. Can we get any of this done? Like all of those things are important, muscles to exercise, and then also to appreciate when you can get some things done. And so if you have children that are interested, encourage them to get involved in their student councils. If your school doesn't have a student council, right, talking to the administration, the PTA to get that going, working with your local council member to encourage and support a school in getting an actually useful and active student council going. Or I think student councils are the best. We need them in every school.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, like real quickly, like I think, yeah, I don't know if there are young people on this call, but like to the extent that there are, or that they're going to be getting this information afterwards, like, like never be discouraged that the issues that you're facing require you to advocate for them on a lesser scale because you're a kid. Like there aren't youth issues. That doesn't exist. There are issues, and there are issues that disproportionately affect young people. And they are just as important as other issues. And a lot of times their solutions, are going to cut across all ages. And in any case, the people in power aren't, children either, or they're not youths, or they're not, necessarily young people. And as much as being involved in politics is a way of, bringing, like taking your own problems into your own hands, we're also one city, like, we're one big community, political community. And it's building those intergenerational ties and like conveying like the seriousness and the depth of like the consequences of these issues that is the only way that we're going to get, real lasting solutions.
And if I could add that really, really quickly, also, like if you're interested in issue areas, it intersects with politics, right? And so, if you join a youth climate organization, you might do bipartisan work, but then also you can do political work that gets you some sort of like government experience. Because, for example, on my campaign, we literally worked with youth climate activists who co-wrote. Right? They didn't just like tell us what they cared about and we were like, hey, thanks for talking to us. They literally co-wrote our Green New Deal plan for the city. And so there's lots of points of engagement, and there are plenty of folks who really, really value the input, the insight, and the brilliance of young people.
They've got these guys get me all charged up, which is so awesome. I hope we're doing it for each other. First of all, I wanted to say that one of the things I love about this panel to follow up on Emilia's comments is that it's multi-generational. That these are the communities we live in. And I love the exchange I also, the student council thing really struck me, Tiffany. I was not like that kid that was ready for that at that stage, you know, but if people ask me who should run for office, I always say, look, there are political families and you're like raised to run for office, and you know, that's fine, especially if your values are right. But the people that should be running for office, and I think we should be supporting for office, are people who are advocates by nature. So what Tiffany's talking about is that kid who just picks an issue and finds their voice either on behalf of themselves or someone else who shared their lived experience with them, right? And then starts talking. Look at the conversation. Look at Émilia and Tiffany. The reason why they are succeeding in the political realm is because they've learned that really comfortable communication, cross-generation, cross-culture, all of that. I love the idea that you pick an idea that matters, it defines your values overall, and then you just develop advocacy skills as a result that you can use in other settings.
Definitely. And in New York, just to add about like certain programs that are out there, I believe it's run through the New York City Campaign Finance Board. I saw Amanda Malillo on the call, so I apologize if this is wrong, but I know they have a youth program where they get youth ambassadors and they work with high school students on how to get involved in politics. There's also Generation Vote. Amanda said in the chat, yes, they do have a youth program. So New York City specifically has that. There's organizations like Generation Vote, Gen Vote, where they are, again, in high schools, getting students involved who are interested. And New York State, you can now register to vote when you're 16 years old. Can't vote until you're 18 unless you're 17 during the primary, and then we'll be 18 on election day. But these are all ways for youth, for younger people to be involved. And I'm going to close us out. The program is called New York City Votes Youth Ambassador Program. And I'm going to close out with a question for Tiffany, because her experience really hits this point well, is what would you say to someone who says, my vote doesn't matter?
Oh my God. Okay, can I just say that, like, let me be your cautionary tale, because I ran a race for DA, right? Like, I lost a race before I won one in a borough of 2.5 million people, and we fell short by 55 votes. And that is, if you do the math, it ended up being a difference of 0.06 of 1%, 600th of 1% was the margin in that race. And so I am here to tell you that absolutely every single vote counts. And then on top of that, right, like, go back to that thing that both myself and Marc talked about before, is that you have to also look at the electoral process in the context of an ecosystem and understand that electoral cycles feed into our non-electoral cycles, and there are opportunities to organize, to talk about issues on a larger scale, to shift the narrative, paradigm shift, to inform the public, to change people's minds, expand people's experiences or understanding of different topics, and build on them cycle over cycle. And, you know, being involved in that process is the way to do it. But yeah, from somebody who lost a race by 55 votes, I am here to tell you that your vote matters, and it matters a lot. It's a huge difference, right? Like, think about the difference of, in theory, if, you know, Marc had gotten to be the Manhattan DA instead of Cy Vance, and the amount of harm that could have been reduced, or any other person who ran a race and came really, you know, really, really close, and there was somebody who aligned with you or you thought would make things just a little bit better.
Definitely. And I wanted to end with that, because I do a lot of outreach in the community. I do a lot of voter registration tables, and so often people come up to me, they're like, oh, what do you have over here? I say, you've got a bowl of candy. I say, yeah, I also have voter registration forms. Would you like to register? And they say, I don't do politics. It doesn't matter. And we know that it does. And those stories of 50 votes really highlight the importance. So
can I add one little step back too? Like, go out and vote, and then when your candidate wins, or even when your candidate doesn't, then go be a pain in their butt afterwards too, right? Like, they got to keep hearing from you.
Absolutely. And do we have any final closing words from anyone else? Any words of wisdom to part us?
Helen, this is Christy. There's a message in the chat that I think is really important about plain language. Can you just speak about the importance of plain language in the political space? Yeah. So the question says, this person is a self-advocate or they're an advisor for self-advocates, and they see that one of the biggest barriers to voting is technical language in the process of voting, so like registration and ballots, and they're a big proponent of direct plain language. Are there any legislative efforts or other efforts to make politics more easily accessible when it comes to language? And I feel like that would be an Émilia or Tiffany question because you're currently in that space.
Yeah, so I am not aware of a specific effort for language on ballots. I do know that there have been a couple of bills within the past few years regarding ballot design. Basically, to generalize, there are a lot of problems with our election system, and the legislature is not inclined to write omnibus bills, speaking of plain language, or big catch-all bills to fix all of these problems, rather than individual bills that handle each problem. And so for ballot design, for instance, font size, I think was something they worked on. I would suggest reaching out both to political clubs that focus on disability rights in particular, like the 504 Club, as well as election rights advocates, because this may very well be something that has been overlooked, which in the disability space is not something we're unused to. But I would caution that there are a lot of changes in the pipeline, and this might not be something that takes into effect for a while. And a lot of the design for ballots is a little bit more variable, but the language that is used is prescribed by law. And so I don't think that's something that localities have the ability to, enact sooner with their own discretion. It probably will require legal change. In any case, that might not happen until the next year or the next couple of years. But again, this is something that might have been overlooked. So I highly encourage you to reach out to folks who do this kind of work and maybe get that. It could be you that starts this change.
Great tips for where to start. So I just want to thank all of our panelists again for being here. It really means so much. And then just to close and remind everyone, DRNY is nonpartisan, and we work to promote voting and civic engagement in the disability community.